Well, hello everybody, and hello Anne. Lovely to see you on this cold, dreary February morning. But it's no ordinary Monday morning, as you know, because today is a special day. It's the kick-off of the Build for the Future National Apprenticeship Week, and who better to be talking to than to launch our own City and Guilds National Apprenticeship Week celebrations than the former Skills and Apprenticeship Minister, Anne Milton. Anne, lovely to see you. How are you this morning?
Great. It's lovely to be here, Kirstie. National Apprenticeship Week, always my favourite week. Fabulous week when you can get out there and meet apprentices.
Well, that's it. That's great. That's what it's all about, isn't it? And that opportunity to really get out in the mix of seeing all the wonderful case studies of just how many young people and older apprentices have been and are benefiting from apprenticeship. So if you are tuned in and listening to this conversation with Anne and I, and you've got any thoughts or any questions, please do post them in the chat, because what Anne has very kindly offered to do as the week progresses is come back and do a special sort of Q&A follow-up. So thank you for doing that, Anne, because I think this is the start, but I think as the week goes on, there's no doubt momentum will build, won't it? And we'll get lots of debate going, I would imagine.
I'm sure we will do. And, I hope that the media will put out lots of stories. And so there will be questions from parents and from colleges and from providers and from young people who are considering doing an apprenticeship.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you very much for offering to do that, Anne, because I think we will take you up on that. But just sort of let's get into our conversation now, because I'll start you off with a kind of nice warm up, easy question. Although hopefully all of them will be at the end of the day. Is this year, as I said, National Apprenticeship Week is aptly called Build for the Future, because of course, as we look to come out of COVID, and which we eventually will do, and let's hope now more sooner than later because of the work with the vaccines, etc. Having what we might call a more growth mindset is going to be vital for our economy and for society generally. So what role do you feel apprenticeships play in helping and will help UK recover from this awful period we have been in?
It is probably the best way for a business or an employer to get the trained workforce they need. I think if I think of what business has always said to me, and indeed, the NHS and organisations like that, is that they get young people, often straight from school, sometimes older people who've maybe lost their job. They can train them on the job. 80% of your time is on the job. And of course, learning on the job is ideal because you can apply what you've learned to the work that you're actually doing. And they retain them. I think that the really critical thing is it's a step on the ladder of progression for you as an individual. And for an employer, it gives you an opportunity to have a dedicated, sustainable workforce for the future. So this is building individuals' future and, of course, building the economy.
No, that's absolutely right, Anne. And I suppose that is probably quite the worrying thing about where we are right now, though, isn't it? Because we can't ignore the fact that because of the pandemic, we have seen a significant fall in apprenticeships during this period, and that's despite, of course, the variety of initiatives that the government have launched. Do you think some of the fall in apprenticeship has been almost because of the initiatives that the government have launched, and therefore employers are kind of confused about where they should prioritise and what they should prioritise, and therefore apprenticeships have sort of fallen away as a result of that?
Yeah, I think employers have been in a lifeboat, really. They've put themselves in a lifeboat. And even in big organisations like the NHS or the care sector, what they've been trying to do is to get through the week. So they haven't been planning ahead. Come the 1st of January, we've got good news on the vaccine. Now is the time. I hope we see them planning ahead. And those plans must include apprentices. Some organisations, a couple of years ago, were doing this already. Looking ahead, what sort of skills do we need in our workforce? What is the best way to get those skilled people? Well, I know what I'll do. I'm going to start employing apprentices. I can train them on the job, dedicated workforce, and I will retain them because I can give them future apprenticeship opportunities as they progress.
Yeah, so I mean, you've touched on quite a lot of the practical issues that employers face. I mean, there was a recent survey done, wasn't there, where 40% of firms employing apprentices are not carrying them on due to the pressures that, as you just said, employers are in this lifeboat. They're having to just survive week by week, day by day, especially in certain sectors where they've been literally decimated. If you take hospitality and catering, aspects of retail. Yeah. So I suppose, sticking with that theme, what is it that government could do more, though, to try and encourage that really great, as you were saying, foresight of planning ahead, that might actually put more flex into the levy? I know that's always been a very sensitive subject, even when you were minister, and I used to have conversations with you about what do we do to flex the levy, and it was probably at the time you rightly used to say, well, look, let's keep it as it is, let's implement it as it is, let's see how it goes. We're now in this really unique time now. Do you think there is now an opportunity to think about how the levy should be maybe used for an emergency period only, maybe just to kind of reinvigorate the system?
I think the point about the levy is you've got the big employers who pay it, and they've got a big pot, and usually, but not universally, more than they can spend. So we said, a quarter of this you can transfer. The trouble is, the gap between wanting to transfer and actually transferring it is very wide. And I think if you were going to put one thing in the pot that would make a difference, it's brokerage of that transfer. It's got to be easy, it's got to be simple. If you're an SME, a non-levy payer, you don't have the time, particularly now, climate. And I should think that will remain for at least a year. You don't have the time to work it all out, all the complicated rules. And I think the one thing we need is brokerage, a bridge, if you like.
Yeah.
The employers who've got a levy pot to the smaller employers who don't have the time to work out how to use it.
And what about those employers, though, that like, let's take hospitality and catering that I mentioned a moment ago, where they literally have had their industry pretty much decimated for now, best part of a year. Do you think, though, those industries should be given some special dispensation, maybe to have their pot that they've been paying into extended, so that as they start to come back out, there's an opportunity for them to still maximise on it? Is that the kind of, I know that's not brokerage as such, that would be a kind of different level of flexibility.
It's a different thing, but it's very valid. So if the 2 years before your levy funds start expiring was valid 2 years ago, it can't be valid now. Business the public sector has been through this enormous upheaval. And so it would be absolutely right to extend that, extend the time before your levy pot expires completely.
Yeah, so I suppose what we're really talking about there, aren't we, Anne, is some really sensible, targeted flexibilities, not general flexibilities, but targeted flexibilities that are being sensibly planned out, that make sure that those sectors are still very much active within the apprenticeship system. Because, as you said earlier, we don't want to lose those out of the system for the years to come, because apprenticeships were here for centuries before COVID. They'll be here for centuries afterwards, right?
Well, City and Guilds know just how long apprentices have been around, 1200 probably. So yes, they're an enduring feature of our education and training system. And I think what business and what providers don't want is lots of new schemes.
Yeah.
The danger for government is they always want to invent something new. And in fact, we've probably got the building blocks in place. We've got the levy, we've got the levy pots, we've got the ability to transfer. What we need is some flex and some facilitation to allow what should happen, but with those building blocks in place.
Yeah. No, it's very sensible, very pragmatic. And just on that theme of, what we need to be careful of, or government need to be careful of, is not lots of different initiatives. Do you think that's happened a little bit, though, with Kickstart, with the boot camps, with the Restart, with all the different programs, with the lifetime guarantee? Do you think, whilst it's also all this arsenal being chucked at the pandemic, so on the one hand to be applauded, on the other hand, does it sort of start to feel like not a very joined up, coherent strategy, and confuses the picture, really?
I think if you introduce new schemes, there are always funding rules attached. And so a new scheme, that's new funding rules, while the existing ones stay in place. So I think it is quite confusing for providers and employers. And if you think of the individuals, because what this week is about apprentices and apprenticeships. So in this, you've got an individual who maybe has left school or college. Maybe they're 35 and have lost their job. They were working in hospitality or in retail. They need a simple path along which they travel to get a new job. And maybe a complete change of sector. They were in retail. Maybe they want to go into the care sector. How do they get there? If you Google jobs, actually, it's extraordinary. You don't find any of these schemes really coming up. So what we need is some hand-holding for those people, because we all have an interest in them getting into jobs as sectors get up and running again after COVID.
No, absolutely. And you've just touched again on a critical point, really, which is all about careers advice and guidance. You know, how do we get a whole ecosystem involved in creating the excitement, actually, and the aspiration that needs to be around these opportunities? And that's what's so great, isn't it, about National Apprenticeship Week, as you were saying at the beginning, you know, celebrating. I mean, you think about it now, I mean, the varieties and flavors, if I can call it that, of apprenticeships that you can do these days, it's just amazing, isn't it? I mean, do you want to say a little bit about some of the ones that you've seen in your time that I know that you've been really fascinated by?
Yeah, in my shower this morning, I was thinking of all the best examples. The wonderful thing about Apprenticeship Week, and I will be absolutely honest, you know, when I used to do those visits, I used to go with some officials from the Department for Education. And at every visit, you used to hear stories that had those tingles running down the back of your spine, because a lot of them were just so inspiring. It's the inspiration. The woman who I met who'd worked in air traffic control, who chucked it all up and gone into construction. She was doing a level 3 in construction. And I can remember her boss saying to me, you know, this woman's going to be a project manager in 4 years. Very bright, able woman. The young chap who'd been chucked out of college twice, which is quite hard to do because colleges are very good, you know, they never let people go. And here he was finishing his degree apprenticeship. He'd done a level 2, missed level 3, done a level 4, gone and done a level 6. The nurses I met, a subject dear to my heart, because I started life as an apprentice, a student nurse, which we did in those days. You know, this was a huge range of people over the age of 20. They were all over the age of 20. Yep. Some of them becoming nurse assistants, doing their apprenticeship. Some of them becoming registered nurses. Some of them had degrees before. All of them had commitments at home. And I suppose the critical thing for people who have lost their job and therefore probably have commitments already, maybe rent, maybe a mortgage, maybe kids at home, is this is a way that you can earn and learn together. So that's a really important thing. And I think this is a really important thing for business as well, is this is an opportunity to employ more mature people, if you like, people who've got some life experience, train them up in a brand new sector.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant you mentioned that, actually, because as you say, the great thing about apprenticeships, and one of the changes, obviously, when you were minister and introduced the levy, you sort of made sure happen, was this breadth of opportunities, not just for young people, but for older workers as well. And we need both to be able to come into the workforce and contribute. In fact, it was fascinating, wasn't it, this morning, the story about the gentleman, is it the 76-year-old gentleman who's going to, you know, do an apprenticeship, and you think, well, wow, why not? That is just so fantastic, isn't it, in illuminating the breadth now of how far apprenticeships can reach.
That's right, but to go back to your point, Kirstie, about careers advice and guidance, I've never liked the term careers. If I could have thought of an alternative, I would have done when we launched the career strategy, because I think most people today don't have a career as such, unless you go into medicine or maybe law. But most people have a series of jobs. They progress through a series of jobs. And I think that is the critical thing that's missing a bit, is people need some hand-holding. Yeah. So, you know, the idea that City and Guilds had, there will be others of bridges, I think is really important. People need their hands held to redirect them into new opportunities. And of course, individuals never take account of the amazing skills they have. Yes. You might have been working in retail, And if somebody said to you, so what skills can you offer? You probably wouldn't know how to articulate that at all. And so some help is needed for people to do that and be able to demonstrate, to know, to have the confidence, the self-esteem, to realise just how much they can offer somebody new.
No, that's brilliant. Thank you very much for giving a plug to our skills bridges. But but you're absolutely right. Not really thought, but the ability to use something like a skills bridge to help then transition and lead into then even apprenticeship a program is a great way of thinking about how those can
Yeah.
sort of converge. And it goes back to that conversation we're having a moment ago about all the various initiatives that the government have put out. Are we actually looking at how they could actually ultimately all connect into a pipeline into apprenticeships, which I think could be a really good way of looking going forward. But what about the role of, I mean, we've been listened to right now by parents, by people who are delivering apprenticeships, people in schools. I mean, what would be your advice to sort of someone in a school, a teacher, or even a parent who was thinking about, well, is an apprenticeship really right for my son and daughter? Because there is still that snobbery. As much as you and I get frustrated by that, there is still that snobbery that exists, isn't it, Anne, really?
There is snobbery and intellectual snobbery, I always used to call it. So I think that the default is that an apprenticeship is about something, it is an opportunity for young people who maybe didn't do so well at school. And it couldn't be further from the truth, really. And if you think of the sort of a high profile apprenticeships, Airbus were offering degree apprenticeships. It's almost harder to get on one of those than it was to get into one of the big universities to do a prestigious degree. So it's not the easy option because you are earning and learning. So you're doing two things at the same time. There can be no better way to start your working life than an apprenticeship. And I think the really important thing for young people, for parents, is what an apprentice gets is they get wise advice, mentoring, and support from people who might well be the age of their parents, but they're not their parents. So you learn a great deal more than just about the job doing an apprenticeship. You acquire life skills that you can acquire nowhere else except in the workplace.
No, I think that's an absolutely brilliant point. And actually the two-wayness of that as well, the opportunity for those workers or people who support an apprenticeship, you get that lovely sort of convergence, don't you, of younger apprenticeships working with older workers and what they learn from the apprentice. So, it can become a very powerful, for an employer, a very powerful two-way mechanism, really.
It can be, and I can remember visiting two businesses. One was an electronics firm, a very well-known household brand actually, and the other was a firm small business, cybersecurity, and they both commented on that they had previously always taken graduates. And in fact, what they were discovering from their apprentices, these 18, 19-year-olds, is they were coming in at quite a junior level, but of course, full of ideas, straight from the modern world, if you like. So we're really making the company look at their existing practices and what they did, and whether there was a new way of doing things. So it's very much a two-way street.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Anne. I wonder if I could just maybe change tack a little bit, although it is still related to apprenticeships, but widen out the conversation and get a couple of thoughts from you on the recently published FE, much awaited FE white paper, Skills for Jobs, as it was then named. And specifically, I suppose, if thinking about it, maybe if you were still minister, what would you be most focusing on in that paper? And what do you think is maybe still potentially lacking or missing from it?
I think it's good in as much as it draws a thread through a lot of initiatives that are already out there. And I think that thread did need to be drawn. I think the idea of centering business centres within colleges is quite a positive thing. I think that there were two things that were lacking for me. Is I've long thought that we needed something visionary about further education. There's no need to explain the higher education sector to the general public. Most people understand it, but we've never really articulated a vision for further education. What do we see it being the beacon of, if you like. And I think the other thing that was missing from the white paper was the role of the independent training providers. And, you know, a big shout out to them this week. They do most of the apprenticeship training in this country. There was a very small mention. And I think what we need to do is to draw colleges and independent training providers together. Colleges get a lot of mention. They're a big and important part of the further education sector. But so are independent training providers, particularly over apprenticeships, and drawing those two together. So vision, pulling together the provider sector, which is very geeky, if you like. That's not something that's going to interest parents, but so that it feels more joined together from that point of view.
No, I think that's a brilliant point, and I'm sure the providers listening in will take a lot of heart from that, Anne. And at the end of the day, we have a skills ecosystem that needs to work together as one, as you say, not sort of in a disjointed way. Sorry, it looked like you wanted to add a bit more.
The only other thing that I would add, and you know, if you look at the achievement levels on maths and English and digital skills, and if you look at the educational attainment, particularly around the country and the discrepancies, I think the other thing that the white paper missed is level 1 and 2.
Yes.
It's a gaping hole. We know that there are a lot of adults who don't have the levels of achievement we need to see at level 1 and 2. And I think it's a very big hole. It felt very much a post-level 3 white paper.
No, I think that's, again, a brilliant point. And it was a deliberate hole in a way, Anne, and that's quite worrying, you know, in the sense, is it deliberately being missed out? And in terms of, you say, the focus being very much on a level 3 white paper. And we all know that creating those progression pathways for higher level skills is absolutely critical, but you're absolutely right. You know, the vast majority of people do really good, well-trained jobs at levels 1 and definitely at levels 2, especially if you think of some of the industries that we've been relying on even through this COVID period. So I think that was very much and is a very much a big gap of the white paper.
Well, and if you think of the colleges, I mean, the colleges do a fantastic job at that sort of level. You know, they are the ones that give people the second, third, fourth, fifth chance to get those sort of qualifications. That is so necessary, as you rightly say, to go on and become part of this skilled workforce we all want to see.
Brilliant. Well, and we've travelled a lot of travelled a lot of areas there and covered a lot of topics. But just sort of as we close off, really, as you look ahead to say the next 1 to 3 years, I won't push you the next century, just the next 1 to 3 years. Let's keep it manageable. What would be your really big hope for apprenticeships?
That they grow, that we start to see young people and older adults really understanding that an apprenticeship isn't for any particular type of person. Apprenticeships are for everybody. I really want to see their growth in the public sector, who were slow to get on the bandwagon. But I really want to see them at the heart of rebuilding our economy and critically replacing for individuals and their families the jobs that they so desperately need to get back on track in the years ahead.
No, well, thank you, Anne. How brilliantly said, and definitely your continued passion for apprenticeships just absolutely oozes out to you. So thank you, and thank you for everybody who've been listening, because I'm sure they've really enjoyed hearing some of those thoughts. And I know certainly some of your comments around what you'd be doing to flex the levy would be very, very interesting to those employers listening in as well. But whether it's planned or coincident, the fact that the National Apprenticeship Week is being celebrated in this week as we run up to Valentine's Day is great, I think, because it means that we're feeling the love for all things apprenticeships, and so we should, as we've just been hearing from Anne. They're the very fabric of our skills system, as they have been, as we were speaking a moment ago, for centuries before us and will be for centuries to come. So I think I might make up a new hashtag for this week, which is hashtag big love to apprenticeships. But before I leave, just a couple of headlines just to promote what's happening throughout the rest of this week. Do look at the agenda that you've got now on the Glisser platform that you're joining with us today. Anne, as I said, is very kindly offered to come back and do a Q&A session later on in the week. On Wednesday the 10th at 10 a.m, we have an apprenticeship panel discussion, a live panel, where you can come and join former and current apprenticeships discussing their journey. And what it's been like to be on apprenticeship this past year, and what the future holds for them. So who better than to hear from the apprenticeships themselves? And then on Thursday, the 11th of February, again at 10 o'clock, we actually have an interview with the current Minister for Skills and Apprenticeships, Gillian Keegan, as well as one of our former City and Guilds apprenticeships, who's now actually our youth engagement executive, Lauren Roberts, and she'll be interviewing Gillian about about what's happening with apprenticeships, but also Gillian's own perspective on her experience as being an apprenticeship. And then on Friday the 12th, the National Apprenticeship team from the government have secured a very special video message from Her Royal Highness the Royal Princess Anne, who happens also to be our president. And so we're immensely proud of our association with Princess Anne, who's an ardent supporter, as you'll hear, of apprenticeships. And she'll again be joined by the current Skills and Apprenticeship Minister, Gillian Keegan. So that'll be a great double header to watch. So all that's left really for me to do once again is thank you for joining, Anne. Thank you so much for helping us kick off this special City and Guilds National Apprenticeship Week, supporting the rest of what's happening in National Apprenticeship Week, and helping remember why apprenticeships are so important. So Anne, thank you once again for being with us.
Been a privilege, Kirstie.
Thank you.